Roll call vote. Supervisor Mulherin?
Here.
And Supervisor Williams?
Here.
Thank you. Good morning.
Do we have any members of the public who have submitted a telecomment form to call in?
No.
Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 2A, discussion and possible action, including direction to staff regarding the review of all countywide contracts, and the sponsor is the executive office. Carmel, can you introduce it?
Yeah, thank you. I'll go ahead and open this up. We started last year with the General Government Committee reviewing county contracts. And as you may know, and the public may know, we have, hundreds of county contracts, and they range from small dollar amounts to in the millions, of course. And so the goal was that the Board of Supervisors would have a better understanding of the contracts that are out there. And so we do have a contracts registry. We expect that the departments will keep that up. But again, the goal is that the board would have a better understanding of the county contracts. So I believe last year we looked at the sheriff's office first. There were some areas that the Board of Supervisors, or basically this committee, wanted to look at. And then I think we looked at the Department of Transportation. Or it was planning, either one. And so right now, before staff moves forward, beginning the process of getting departments in to review their contracts with the General Government Committee, we wanted to bring this before the General Government Committee and get your direction, since this is a new year and new membership. And so before I go any further, I would like to ask Deputy CEO Darcy Antle, if I've missed anything, please correct me if I've said anything inaccurate, and go ahead and proceed, Darcy. Thank you.
That's correct, Carmel. We did review DOT, so the Department of Transportation, and the SO. The SO came in for 2 meetings, and the Department of Transportation 1. That's it.
So if this board chooses, we could go with the largest department in the county, which is Health and Human Services, and know that it would probably take a good 4 meetings to go through Health and Human Services. If you chose to go within the different departments in Health and Human Services, we could start with behavioral health, mental health, public health, whatever you would like to do. The other option is to start with, obviously, some of the smaller departments. And then again, this is a new year, so you could choose to do something entirely different. And you could also choose to bring it back to the board and not review the contract. So it's your choice. So at this point, Chair Williams, I would like to turn it over to you and Supervisor Mulherin.
So what caught my eye, and I think may have started this process, is I think we, in a meeting last year, mentioned that there may be 1,000 contracts, and we don't have somebody to track those 1,000 contracts, and we're hoping the individual departments are doing it. And this looked like a chance to more formally review at a different layer in the org chart. So I think it's valuable. I don't want to use a lot of the CEO's time on this. I'd rather she focus on the pandemic. There's an emergency underway, but I think we could probably take this offline and go through and mark up contracts for questions, and then come back perhaps to ask Darcy to help explain.
Okay, and the department head, sure.
No, go ahead.
That would work for me as well. Thank you.
And as far as where we begin, I wonder if it might make sense to begin with a department with fewer contracts so that we can get a model in place. HHSA is a bit overwhelming as a starting point. What are some other departments that the CEO would recommend?
Honestly, I think to review Health and Human Services would probably be a good step, though it will take some time. But they do have so many contracts. That would really give this committee and then the board a better understanding. We started with the sheriff's office because there were some questions. Probation has contracts. Everybody does. You might want to look at the planning department, Health and Human Services. The ag department, they have contracts, but not that many. So some of the smaller, like the libraries, the museum, I don't know that I would spend a lot of time and go with that. I would say if you're going to do this, that at this point in time, we should take a look at how we dissect health and human services, and we start there. I think they bring the majority of the contracts to the board. Many of their contracts are retroactive, not their fault. It's state and federal funding, and the way the funding comes down, the contracts are made to be retroactive. So I think it would be a good place to start, Chair Williams.
Should we establish criteria as we're reviewing the contracts? How are we going to determine if there's duplication between departments other than a couple supervisors having a good memory and calling out that there's a contract that is for services that's being provided by another department, and maybe there's an economy of scale that we should think about?
We could come up with a list of criteria and ask the departments to, whether it's a checklist of some sort, to have the department go through their contracts with that checklist so that there's one layer of review that's done before it gets to the board. Within the agency, though, they really have, because this was a problem initially, they really have worked to try to reduce duplication. But, you know, when you have, whether it's the county or the agency, they're both really big, and so it's possible to miss something. So I would say that we start with some process of the initial criteria, have the department do that first review on that initial criteria with that checklist, and then bring the contracts forward. And also to look at them. Public health may have the least number of contracts. Social services and mental health probably have the largest dollar amount contracts, and that's an assumption on my part, but that's what I would say.
Should we be looking at why retroactive contracts are being brought to the board? I understand for HHSA reimbursement, a lot of times we don't know until after the fact, just the convoluted nature of state and federal financing of human services. What about some of the other departments? I see there's actually an item on the agenda tomorrow that's a retroactive agreement. Should this be happening? Or should we bring a recommendation back to the full board that we don't want to see retroactive contracts, except where it saves the county money in very specific narrow areas?
Well, I think if I may respond to that, Chair Williams, and then I would ask Deputy CEO Antle to respond as well. The retroactive contracts are something that's been problematic, not only here, but other counties as well. I think that this board has given direction on retroactive contracts, and a contract that would normally go on the consent calendar may go on the regular agenda because it's retroactive, and the reason that it's retroactive does not appear to be substantial enough. And so that department head does have to speak with the board about why the contract is retro. I think maybe that's an area that we certainly could look at first before we get into the individual departments and divisions. Retroactive, what the reasons for retro. I mean, we certainly know that many times we're negotiating a contract and it takes a little longer to negotiate. But I think the retroactive contract, I mean, basically, you know, what the board said last year, there was some validity there that when you get a retroactive contract, essentially you're considered to just rubber stamp it because the contract's already in place. And I think when we have ongoing contracts, you know, 5-year contracts that are renewed, or a large contract like, let's just say RCS that has provided services for over 20 years, something like that may take a little longer to negotiate, so it comes in retroactively, but we know that they will still get the contract because they're the only service provider in town. So I would say that, you know, it would be a really good idea, I think, Chair Williams, to actually really focus on what a retroactive contract is, why it's retroactive, what that means, and are there ways to mitigate that. That may be the first topic that the General Government Committee wants to deal with, rather than just getting into department contracts.
Well, I would support that.
Yeah, I think that is a really good idea. And I mean, just to hear you say that, CEO, is, maybe this is something we need to look at. If somebody has a contract that's fairly ongoing, maybe the negotiations need to start earlier so that we're not having a need for retroactive contract. In particular, if there's only really one service provider, there should, in my opinion, be no need for that. So it seems like there's some room for improvement on those.
So what I'd like to do, if it's okay then, is for the next meeting, what we can do is I would like to bring in a small group of department heads that consistently have multiple contracts and contracts that are retroactive. I want to make it clear, though, that there are ways to approach this. This is not a public shaming of the department heads because they have a retroactive contract. Let me be real clear. There are times that something happens and you just can't help it, or you get money, or whatever. We know that, and I think Supervisor Mulheron, that's what you're referring to. So I would like to bring in a group of 2 or 3 department heads, and let's have that discussion with the board as to how we can improve the process, how we can explain retroactive contracts, and maybe have a little bit more of a marker on when we would move forward and when we wouldn't. So if that's okay, we can agendize that for the next general government meeting. And I don't know, Deputy CEO Antle, if you had anything to add on that. And Supervisor Mulhern wanted to add, so I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So this is Darcy. No, I agree with what you're stating. I do. We do have an unusual amount of retro this year in particular. The pandemic and emergencies, we're always going to have retro contracts, but also the workload that has been placed on the department, and particular HHSA this year, we are seeing a few more retros in that area, but we worked really hard last year to clean it up, and the pandemic has caused some more delays this year. But I think we can get back on track. And I think to Supervisor Williams' point, if there's clear guidelines and expectations around what retro is, we can clean that up a little bit more.
Chair.
Go ahead. And I think we have a small enough group we can somewhat self-moderate here.
Okay, thanks. On this, coming up next on this agenda is actually an item I mentioned about a contract that was brought forward and some data that I wish had been provided in the agenda summary. And I think the same thing holds true for this conversation that we'll have with the department heads about what included when it comes before the board, their contracts, including summaries if that's available. So I hope that, yes, not publicly shame anybody, of course, but I hope that when the department heads are thinking about bringing this back to the General Government Committee, they'll think about their contracts and what they put in an agenda summary that would be more helpful for the supervisors and the community to understand the costs and just really provide as much data and information as possible.
What do you think of adding a field in the agenda summary for the justification for the retroactive nature, so that it gives everybody an opportunity to explain there may be justification, but also think about contracts that will be coming up, and if there isn't justification, getting those before the board before the retroactive is needed.
We can do something like that. I mean, we change the agenda summaries whenever we need to. Darcy, were you going to comment?
No, I agree with that. I think since Supervisor Mulhern had brought this up, we've been working, or at least I've been working with HHSAs to get theirs a little bit better. The challenge could be that the agenda summaries for some of these items could get very lengthy as well. So it may be that there's an attachment, a staff report or justification attached. But I think we can work through some of that.
So would you like, not to roll into the second item but I'm thinking we already have 2A, of course, being the contracts, and 2B being direction to staff regarding improvement of agenda item quality prior to publication. Do we want to discuss both of those at the next meeting? And again, like I said, we can have a small group of department heads and we can have that dialogue. I think it would benefit the supervisors to get a greater understanding of why some of the agenda items come forward in the manner that they do. What contracts will consistently be retroactive based on a state or federal dollar time frame, those key points. So I don't know if you're ready to do that, to do 2A and 2B and bring those back with the department heads. I didn't want to really move on these for this meeting. We didn't want to move on these for this meeting because we really wanted to hear from both of you as to how you wanted to proceed. But I think this is really good direction, and I welcome having 2 or 3 of the department heads with us to have this discussion.
I would support that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, so then for item 2A, then let me just go back to this.
We should get public comment on 2A at some point.
Okay, before we move on. Okay, that's fine.
Clerk, do we have any public comment for 2A?
No, we do not.
Okay, back to the committee.
So would you like to take an action to recommend that this come back at the next meeting with more information and ready to have a dialogue with the department heads about retroactive contracts?
For item 2B, yes.
Well, actually, it will be. We're on 2A right now, and then we'll get
Okay,
to
yeah. Yeah, that would be fine with me.
Okay, I agree.
Okay, and then if we go to 2B, it would basically be the same thing. I'm just looking to see what we put on here as far as action, provide direction. So it would be for staff to return at the next general government meeting with additional information and department heads to dialogue with the committee around quality of the agenda summaries.
So a somewhat related item to 2B, the website in general is difficult to navigate. A lot of times I use the Google to try to find content, and we have content that's stale, that contradicts other pages. Should we try to include that in this effort, a general cleanup of some of the county portal?
Chair Williams, honestly, I would like to have that be a separate item because I think it's a bigger item, and the departments, they assign one person to update their website. That seems to be an area that is severely lacking throughout the county system. What I would like to do is have that as a separate item that we can focus on and actually identify if there are IT staff, if there are greater needs. And you're right, nobody's going to say no to that. So
where I see it tying in with this agenda item is a lot of times the summary should reference documentation that's on the county website, right, to learn more. And I think just that process on the agenda summary of asking the sponsor to point at the underlying documentation on the county website may, refresh their memory that it's actually not up to date or it's missing, and it would give the public a way to quickly jump to the pertinent documents.
So we can include it. I do see it as a bigger item, but we can include it in the next meeting with this item, knowing that there may be an additional separate item coming forward after that.
Got it.
Would
okay,
that work?
I think that works. Mo, does that work for you?
Yes, and if you're done with your notes from this item, then I would share mine whenever you're ready.
Go ahead.
So I did have in my notes actually several times that information from a previous agenda item, if there's an item that's carried forward, should be included. And maybe Supervisor Williams' solution would work for that if there's a link, or if it's an attachment of the previous board item and any public comment just dated for the previous meeting. And I also think that the agenda summary should include every department that is affected. And I realize that, one department is often bringing something forward, but there may be multiple departments that are impacted. So it would be nice if it could include that, even if it's in the written summary. And I already said about having more data attached. And if it's a standing board item, such as public expression or the legislative item or the CEO report, and it's not attached, I think it would be nice when you click on that link to have it say the summary, that the clerks have it by heart about how to make a public expression, just so that it's constantly being reminded. When I opened the public expression, it just is blank. So I just think just keeping that summary in there. And when we're talking about contracts that are multiple years, it would be helpful, I believe, if the breakdown of the budget per year is listed in the agenda summary. So it's fiscal year, this much money, instead of the full amount of the contract, because it certainly makes it seem like the contracts are a lot more money than when you break it down annually. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Usually we have on the agenda summary, in the back of the agenda summary, we will have the dollar amount, and we have it broken down by year. So we always have to have the total dollar amount in the agenda summary. But as far as a greater breakdown, I think that is certainly something that we could direct the departments to do. I think all of your comments, I would ask Atlas, who I think Atlas is clerking the meeting, not Lindsay. I would ask to be sure that we get Supervisor Mulheron's comments incorporated in so that we could use them as we bring forward the item for the next meeting.
We'll be sure to do that.
Thank you, Atlas.
Thank you.
So do you want to do public comment and vote on item 2B now?
Yeah, let's go to public comment. Is there any?
No, there is not.
Can we entertain a motion?
I would move the recommended action with the direction provided.
And that's on 2A and 2B?
Yes.
Okay. I would second that. Clerk, can you conduct a vote?
Yes,
Count?
I can. Supervisor Mulhern
Yes.
and Supervisor Williams.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, let's move on to 2C. And my county webmail just closed with the item. Give me a second. That'll be another item we can bring up maybe next time.
Not today.
Stand by. Okay, 2C, discussion and possible direction to staff regarding clarification of boards and commissions appointments process. And this is also sponsored by the executive office. Can you introduce the item?
Sure. This is an item actually around the appointments. I'm going to say that when Supervisor Mulheron joined us in January, it was the key question that the supervisor has had around boards and commissions and how we move forward with the appointment process. So I believe that, this is here as a referral based on the questions that Supervisor Mulheron had. So you may have more to add at this point in time. And so I would, if okay, I'd like to turn it over to you.
I actually would just like to thank the clerk of the board for creating these documents, because if I had them at the beginning of January, it might have been a little bit easier. I think it's incredibly helpful the way that it's laid out, and maybe room for improvement, but I think that moving forward, this would really help new supervisors as they're trying to figure out these appointments. So thank you.
So is there follow-up that's needed?
I think it would be nice if these were included in the agenda every year when we approve the calendar.
Oh,
Just to have it on the beginning of January or December, just to have it on every year and keep it out in the public. But I don't think that it needs to come back other than that.
okay. So we will refer this to the clerk to go ahead and that's something that we would bring it back to the board just because it's an action, and it would come from the General Government Committee, and then we can go ahead and there should be no reason why we can't move forward with that.
Is there any interest in maybe getting this documentation up on the county website? I know it's all there in different pieces, but you have to click here, you have to click there. If you go through the maze wrong, you get a different answer. And I think as much as supervisors need this information, the public could also use it. And it's we have county IS basically working with duct tape to hold infrastructure together, quite literally. And so, as the CEO said earlier, there's no shaming here. We just don't have the infrastructure, and it's incredible that we're doing as well as we are considering. Maybe now is a good time for this committee, or at a future meeting, good time for this committee to look at how we could prioritize infrastructure improvements to provide better awareness to the general public of boards, commissions, the process for approval, pending applications, the chronology of who served in the past, where the associated minutes are. And I know that's all on the county website, but seriously, it's a maze trying to find it. If any one of us right now went to look for it, we'd be clicking around for a while. And you should try doing it on your phone, where you're pinching and squeezing and zooming and scrolling. Am I the only one running into these problems? Okay, so you're muted, Mo, but I heard you say
No.
So let's bring that back as an agenda item, and I can provide the clerk a write-up on some of these bullet points for discussion.
Okay, Chair Williams, just one key point as far as process is that what comes to the committees, whether it's general government or our health committee, is it goes through the board. So I would ask you, if you will, to please bring this up at tomorrow's board meeting as a referral to general government so that we can follow the process, and then we can certainly have it at the next general government meeting.
I would be happy to do that.
Okay.
But also in terms of process, I think we actually passed this item maybe a year and a half ago. And it was when I was told I could only get one item on the agenda, and suddenly my item had subsections A through T. Some of those items touched on what we're discussing today, with needing infrastructure improvements and digitizing the process. So I'm happy to bring that up tomorrow, but I think the full board actually gave direction on this previously.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, thank you for that. Yep. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, any public comment?
No, there is not.
Okay. Let's move on to items.
Do we need to take a vote on that, Supervisor?
Yeah, take a vote.
Yeah, we'll take, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So we're moving the recommended action to bring this back to the full board, to have these documents on the agenda every year for the board, and also to find a place for it to live on the website.
That's good. Thank you.
Let's conduct a vote.
Supervisor Mulhern
Yes.
and Supervisor Williams.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Any objection to combining 3A, 3B, and 3C, all approval of minutes, various meetings?
Supervisor Williams, I don't like to vote on minutes when I wasn't in attendance at the meeting, and I realize that there's three minutes that we're being asked to approve today. I don't know process-wise what we need to do. There's only two supervisors.
And neither of us were there. I mean, one option is we could vote against it and deny them, but that'll just that'll just take it down the road.
We are legally allowed to vote for them, even if we weren't in attendance, just based on the fact that they look correct. However, it's just my preference not to. I don't know if it's an option at this point or not, though, because I think they probably do need to be in the public record.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, and I appreciate that Supervisor Mulhern did bring this up at the prior Board of Supervisors meetings in terms of not wanting to vote on minutes for meetings she hadn't been there for. I will let you know I did a little bit of additional follow-up after that meeting. I haven't found anything in our rules or anything in Robert's rules which would preclude a supervisor who wasn't present from voting on the minutes. And actually, in looking at our rules, the Board of Supervisors actually has it in the rules that the clerk of the board prepares the minutes, and that the board is given essentially the opportunity to modify the minutes by a majority vote. But it seems to operate under a default assumption that without a desire to change the minutes, that the minutes would be essentially accepted as presented by the clerk of the board. For that reason, I would suggest that it is appropriate to go ahead and vote, and simply registering that you are not recommending or advocating for any changes to the minutes at this time.
Is there any public comment on 3A, 3B, or 3C?
No, there is not.
So I would be comfortable passing it because there's a constant flow that distracts the clerk. I would rather that these just go away. And I don't know what value there is at this point in changing history.
Yeah, I don't have any modifications to the minutes. So.
Do you want to move that we have no modifications and that by default we accept?
Well, that's.
CEO, did you have a?
Oh, I was just saying, I think that might maybe serve the needs of all of us to say that there's no modifications to the minute. And then Christian, should that be good enough?
Yeah, I believe that would be sufficient.
And then, Mo, you don't have to vote on something that you don't feel comfortable with, and basically you're not making any modifications. So essentially they could move forward.
Yeah, no problem. I move that we approve the minutes from items 3A, 3B, and 3C without modification.
Let's vote.
Supervisor Williams
Yes.
and Supervisor Mulhern.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Item 3E, announcements. Do we have any announcements?
No, we do not.
Okay. Item 3F, matters from staff.
Chair Williams, just one comment about the legislative platform moving forward, that I don't know if there's any additional work that needs to be done. I know staff did not get any changes outside of the board meeting. And I apologize, I wasn't at the board meeting, so this is relayed to me by staff. So I think that I don't know if there's anything additional that needs to be done with the legislative platform. Obviously, we don't have it on the agenda because we didn't need to put it on. But in going forward, I think it's something that we'll need to look at as to how we move forward with the legislative platform with the General Government Committee. But for today, I just wanted to make that comment so that it's highlighted, that if there's anything additional that needs done by individual board members, if you could please refer back to executive office staff so we can finalize the legislative platform. That's all. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. No other matters from staff? Okay, are we ready for adjournment?
Yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned at 9:41.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you very much. Have a good morning.
You too.